Today, we are talking about the number one reason that businesses fail to sell.
In today's economy, more people than ever are looking to buy and sell businesses. But how do you do it? Welcome to the Deal Board, presented by Transworld Business Advisors. Straight talk about real deals and real people. Listen to stories, interviews, and expert advice to help your business sale, merger, or acquisition process. Now, here are your business exit experts, Andy and Jessica.
Welcome back, everybody. And we have a very special Deal Board episode for you. We are live in person again at our UFG headquarters in West Palm Beach. Today, we are talking about the number one reason that businesses fail to sell.
They don't sell because they're overpriced. And it's funny, I came up with this idea because I've been working with two friends who want to sell their business. And we've been working on the projects for probably the better part of a year now. And, you know, sometimes I'm a little bit of a pushover.
No,
and
never.
A little bit. And so I've been trying to explain to these people that their businesses are overpriced. And they give me the reasons why it's not overpriced. And, you know, and one of them happens to be married to an accountant and one happens to be married, you know, the other person's, you know, is a family business. So I have to get multiple people to agree on prices. And of course, they've all heard from other people in their social circles or even business circles, industry circles, well, this person sold for this much. And, you know, it's never quite the truth. So it's really frustrating. And we are so confident in this that we think that Transworld does such a great job of marketing that if you have been on this market with Transworld and it's not selling, you're probably overpriced.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, it's different when it's your business, right? It's different for everybody when it's your business. And I think one of the reasons we wanted to do this topic today, and for, you know, your two friends and everybody out there, it's emotional when it's your business, right? It's not subjective. It's not based on the numbers. And today we're going to talk about objective evidence. We're going to talk about numbers. We're going to talk about statistics, research that we've done over the thousands upon thousands of sales, right?
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to get better, right? I don't see this year. First of all, we think this year is going to be a fantastic year in selling your business. And we think a lot of businesses are going to come to market. That seller tsunami, it's not quite a tsunami in one big wave. It's trickling in, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So we think that this is going to continue, if not make it a little harder to sell your business if there's more inventory this year. Interest rates are still a little bit higher.
Yeah, but they could come down.
They could come down, but it's still not as easy to sell your business. And the market has been so incredible for the last few years.
Yep.
I mean, like take COVID out of it, but even before COVID, you could go back 5 or 6 years where the selling market for selling your business was absolutely on the seller side.
Right.
And if you didn't sell in the last half decade, take COVID out of it,
Yep.
then you are overpriced.
Yeah. So we think, again, if you're with Transworld, the right broker, it's marketed properly, it's not selling, 99% of the reason is probably the price.
Right.
Yep.
So now we're going to delve into the reasons why we don't think the buyers buy when it is overpriced. So what's the first one?
First one is educated buyers. So we've been doing the podcast for how long now? 4 years?
4 years.
4 years, right? So I remember, and we've talked about this when we started, we're like, wouldn't it be great if all the buyers had all this information, they were educated about the process? Well, guess what? They are now. There is a ton of information online. They have a wealth of information, more than they've ever had before. And they know how valuation works. They know expectations. We'll talk about another reason why overpriced doesn't work, but there is buying business influencers now, buying business shows. I mean, if you go on Amazon, there's all kinds of books. They are as educated as they get.
Somebody just showed me a Facebook group that had 400,000. It was Al who was telling me about it.
Yeah, the for sale by business owner group. It's all buyers. It's like over almost 500,000 business buying.
500,000 people talking about business sales. So people are very educated. So the idea that put my business up for sale and just make an offer is not going to work.
No.
It's not going to work. And so the reason for that, and the reason for the education at this point, is what we think is there's just so much information available because of the internet.
Yeah, there is. And it's, you know what, I think this is a good thing. Like buying small businesses is now, I don't want to call it a popular thing, but it's gaining a momentum. And that's good, because if the seller tsunami came in one big wave, or even this trickling, and we didn't have this uprising of popularity of buying small businesses amongst the younger generations, we'd have a really big problem. And we talked about that years ago.
Right.
We don't have a big problem because of the increase in interest of buying small businesses. But with that also comes the flip side. These buyers now know what they're doing. And they know when they're looking for a business on Transworld's website or the others' websites, they know what's overpriced and what's not. They know what markets are because of
the internet. I mean, you could literally cut and paste a whole bunch of listings and put them in an Excel spreadsheet and comparatively shop them. I mean, you could look at, if you want to buy a restaurant or a pizza parlor or something that there's several of that type of business for sale, it's very easy to comparative shop. In fact, some of our brokers talk to sellers about, if they want to sell fast, they probably have to be in the top 20% of earnings to price ratio.
Mm-hmm.
So if their price ratio is, say, 2 times, like we always used to kid, or 3 times, if they're at 4 times and they are in the, highest percentile of, in that top percentile of people sales to price to earnings ratio, they're not going to sell.
Mm-mm. No. And it's not just, I think it's about being comparable to your industry, but you also have to remember buyers are shopping across industries too. So, even if you're in an industry that's fairly niche and you're not a restaurant and they're not thousands of restaurants, say I'm trying to think of a very niche business, maybe.
Anything. Anything. You could, we were talking about the pet business. We were talking, somebody could easily buy a pet boarding business, and then the next day we could show them a landscaping business. And then I was talking about a plumbing business, a septic tank business. You think that's really not a very attractive business, but the price drove that sale. Right. We were out there in the marketplace, and we decided to take off what type of business it was in the advertising because no one was looking at it. And then when we just sold it based on price to earnings, we had a whole bunch of people wanting to buy that business, and we eventually sold it. So I think what, we hear more often than I want to buy a pizza parlor, or I want to buy a clothing manufacturer, or I want to buy a distribution business. I think we hear more of, I want to make $250,000. I want to make $500,000.
Yep. That is the most common. And if we think about, we've talked about who buys businesses on the podcast before, but if we go back to the largest buyer pool, they're individuals that are leaving corporate. They need to replace an income. So that number is usually tied to, I need to make $250,000 a year. I'm willing to do 10 different things. Let's look at where I can get the best deal. Where's the best price to earnings ratio? And I think why this is important too, we're talking really about the top of the funnel, but selling a business is just like any other sales process. And you got to create a lot of interest and attract a lot of buyers to come in the funnel,
right,
to find the right one, right?
Yeah. And back to your point of, they'll buy anything. We had a gentleman who was leaving Wall Street. He was a Wall Street analyst, and he was leaving, and he wound up buying an ice company.
Oh, like they make ice?
Make ice. He had the formula.
Yeah.
But it, was an ice company that sold to the cruise lines, that shipped overseas, that did big blocks, that sold, a lot of bulk kind of ice, and they're still in business, and he's doing great, and I think he loves it. So it's, a lot of these people just want to buy a business that they can grow. So again, the price comes into it, and then. Lastly, I think the culture is changing out there. Not lastly, our next point.
Yes. The culture is changing. So the baby boomers are retiring, and Gen X, which has been in the midst of this for a number of years,
sure,
is a little bit culturally different than the baby boomer generation. But the millennials, which we were worried about the millennials and their entrepreneurial genes, but
they're doing good.
They're good. It kicked in during COVID, right?
Yep.
They're now all entrepreneurs, right? But the millennial generation is culturally very different from their parents, the baby boomers. And one of the ways they're different, and we're seeing this play out in a lot of different industries, but in ours too, is an aversion to negotiation.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them want to just know the price. They want to do their research. They want to look at spreadsheets. They want to understand, get educated. A lot of baby boomers want to get educated, super educated. They do all kinds of research online before they buy a product, but they don't want to haggle. They want to get, and sometimes they're willing to pay a fair price.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this before. Sometimes they're even adverse to buying something that's too cheap or that looks too good to be true. Again, they don't want to buy something that's completely overpriced, and they're not going to negotiate. They're just not going to. So they're looking for something that a business that they feel like they can trust that process.
Yeah. It's interesting. As we're talking, I'm thinking about this, using the real estate market as a metaphor, like we use quite often, right? But you think about the millennials have come into the real estate market in the last 10 years, right?
Right.
And there's been this entirely new phenomenon in residential real estate where people just offer the asking price, right? It used to be, I'm going to offer 20% lower than the asking price, and then we're going to go back and forth. And the millennials come in, and yes, it's been a competitive market and everything, but they just offer asking.
You see this in a lot of business models that used to be historically negotiation, transactions, like buying a car. I mean, how many dealerships, I mean, first of all, right now, since COVID, since the crisis of supply chain issues, there is zero negotiation for buying a car. I just happened to have bought a car, and they said, good news, you get the pay sticker.
I know. We just bought one too. And it was like, we're only going to mark it up $5,000 over sticker. It's your day.
But you had no chance to negotiate, even if you wanted to.
No.
So really almost the other side, you think of about the millennials that are working in these businesses, or the people that are owning these businesses now. They don't want to negotiate either.
No. They want to put their price out on the marketplace and say, this is what I want for my business. And they're expecting a close to full price offer. Right.
And so that kind of leads us right into the next thing is that, it's, and I hate to call people out by the name Karen has become synonymous with people who are being unreasonable. I don't think that's unfair to all the Karens out there. We apologize. But the perception of unreasonableness is, people don't want to go there if people are going to be unreasonable.
Yeah. And I think the perceptions created, we talked about the education, right? So buyer is on our business listing site. The perception is they know what market value is for this business based on the earnings, right?
Right.
And if the market's 2 times, right, or 2.5 times, somewhere between 2 and 3 right now.
Right.
And you're priced at 4, 5, 6 times, that's the perception of unreasonableness. Right there, especially if you're listed with, like we talked about, a good broker. They're like, we know the seller's been educated because they're working with somebody. We know they've been educated on the market. We know they've looked at comps, and there's been a decision to price this business higher than the marketplace.
Yeah, in fact, on the one listing I'm working on, I got a message from a strategic buyer, a large company in the industry doing a roll-up, and they just said, hey, by the way, your seller's going to really have to adjust their price. It's not even close. So that probably turned them off to even thinking about working on the deal, right?
Yeah, because they're thinking to themselves, and ultimately when we get into a deal, it's a lot of psychology, right?
Right.
And so the buyer's thinking about, and they have choices, right? Who do I want to get into this deal with? It's going to be a trying situation. It's going to be emotional. It's going to be mentally challenging. And I can either work with somebody that I think is going to be reasonable because they're asking reasonable things in nature right now, or I can get into a negotiation or a battle with somebody. This is the perception, right? This might not be the truth, with somebody who's overpriced and they're picking apples and oranges.
And forget the fact that they're going to have to deal with them through the transaction and buy the business. Guess what they're going to have to do afterwards?
Deal with them through the transition period, which could be a couple weeks, could be a couple years.
Or forever, right? And they might be dealing with someone, or they might see that as this person has been unreasonable in business all this time. I don't want to inherit someone else's nightmare. How many customers have been quote unquote ripped off, overpriced, overcharged for businesses? And I'm going to go around and try to take this business and now make it a market leader. And I might run into a bunch of people saying, your seller was unreasonable. So it's just really a bad way to kind of start, and especially, the sellers have to carefully consider, what's going on in the marketplace these days. And they have to align that price based on industry standards. Otherwise, it's just not going to work.
Yeah. And again, remember, this is perception. You might be the most reasonable person on the face of the earth, the most reasonable business person to negotiate with, but the perception on the internet, right, which unfortunately does not have a backstory. You can't, they don't have the ability to meet you. We don't want them to at that point, right? But this is all the perception from the numbers that are displayed.
Listen, the first thing out there is the ad, right? It says, hey, amazing restaurant location for sale, amazing distribution company for sale, amazing manufacturing company for sale. And then the next thing right next to it is what? The price. And then the down payment, and then the SDE, right? Mm-hmm. So right there in the first 4 lines, they're getting hit with the first impression of your business. And if the impression is, hey, we're completely overpriced. And we're not even talking about down payments these days, because that's a whole nother story too, right? Mm-hmm. If it's all cash, that's another problem.
Yeah.
But we won't talk about that today. That's part of being unreasonable, I guess.
Yeah, it is. And it is unfortunately a lot of people, and this is, a whole different show, but a lot of people make judgments and decisions based on that ad, right? And they'll move on. And because there is enough opportunity in the marketplace nowadays that they can just move on. It's not just your business and 3 others. It's your business and thousands of others they can choose from. So kind of tied into the next one is, we see this aversion to negotiation, perception of unreasonableness. Another thing that we see often is buyers have a fear of offending the sellers. And I feel like this is a really big one that kind of is also the reason why the perception of unreasonableness and the aversion to negotiation is important, is because ultimately the buyers have a fear of offending the business owners.
Yeah, again, you're buying their business. You're hoping that you're going to get all the goodwill that's associated with that business. And if you immediately offend the seller, they might not train you properly. They might not tell you everything that's going on in the business. They might not give you the secrets. They might not give you the recipes, the formulas of success.
Yeah.
And then, so people are very, very hesitant to offend the seller. Because, and I've heard this, I heard that quote from buyers saying, I don't even want to offend the seller.
Yeah. Because
I know what I think it's worth, but I don't want to offend the seller.
I mean, I know I've done this in my career, and I know other brokers have done this. It'll be, okay, well, what do you think is a fair offer? And they're like, no, I don't want to even go there. I need this person in my court. I need them on my side. This is a short-term marriage. It could be, like we said, it could be a couple weeks, few years, it could be forever. I'm working with this person, and my success depends on them liking me, right? And being able to work together. We've heard that for years.
Yeah.
So that's not just a generational shift. That's a really important part of buying a business, and educated buyers know that they need a partnership with the seller, and starting off on the foot of, okay, you're overpriced, so I'm going to offer you market, which may be 50% less than what you're asking.
Right.
They're fearful that the sellers
are going to get angry and just not deal with them. And they're going to have to deal with an angry seller, and whether through the whole process. And how many times have we been in a selling, in a showing, and we leave that showing and the seller grabs us and says, that's the buyer. I want to deal with that person, right? I want that person. And immediately lowers the price at that point, right? Yep. So they all of a sudden, have this revelation that it's time for them to lower the price because they found the right buyer. Meanwhile, they don't realize that they've been offending and showing unreasonableness and perhaps scaring away buyers who are afraid to offend them.
Yeah.
Over this whole period of time. So don't do it later. Do it now. Have a reasonable price, because people don't want to offend anymore. It's a cultural thing. Yes, if you're get upset because people are woke now, it's the new generation. Everybody doesn't like change. Well, the world is changing. There's very few places that and it's a cultural thing. It's a worldwide thing now, right? Too. We are an international company, and one of the things that we're seeing as we deal with the people that are immigrating, or we're training people. Both of us are training people from overseas. We see that there are different cultures that would never they don't like negotiations. No. It's seen as a bad thing. It seems like, and obviously there are some cultures.
There's the other side too, right?
Yeah, we've all been to Cancun trying to buy a blanket. But
but I think it is really important, and this fear of offending sellers is a big one. And you just have to know. I was thinking when you're talking about I think it was a retail store that we sold, and they were overpriced for a number of months. And there was this younger couple that came in. It was the same thing. They're like, that's the buyer. And the younger couple didn't want to offend the seller, but also simply just couldn't afford the business at that price.
Right.
Kept the business on the market for a couple more months. And the seller came back to us and they said, we want to sell to that couple. We'll lower our price by 40% to sell to that couple. Well, think of the so we lowered the price, went back to the couple. The couple was able to buy business. It's a great story. They're still in business. They're still friends, right? But all the opportunities from the previous buyers, the previous showings that we missed because we didn't have that market rate on that company.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the evidence is clear. We've been tracking our statistics over the last several years, and we have now tracked that if you are 15% above the market, the market value for your business, you are much more likely not to sell. We see a huge drop off. It's right around this 15% year over year. Wow. It's really incredible. We could maybe even put the graph up in our show notes, but it just drops off. So you really need to be within about 15%. And this is industry-wide. This is not just Transworld. We track these things. We've seen it. We've talked to some of the folks at BizComps and Deal Stats, and we see this over and over and over again, where if a business is priced high, and we see this anecdotally, right? We were talking beforehand about how we had to take some businesses off the market and reintroduce them at a better price, and what happens?
Yeah, and then they end up selling. So we had the doggy daycare, the pet care company you were referencing earlier, put it on the market. It was overpriced, and I think one point I want to hit here, overpriced. You said 15% over market. Right. We're not talking 50%.
No.
It's a slim margin.
It's a very slim margin.
Right. So it was the same thing. This was not 50% overpriced. It was probably like it would sell for a 2.5 times multiple, and we're at like a 3.1. Not crazy, right? And so we put it on the market, sat on the market for 9 months. And the seller got a little frustrated. We came around to the holidays. We pulled it off the market for a couple months, went back on the market early the following year at the market rate, multiple offers in the first week.
Right. We've seen that multiple times where we all of a sudden finally drop the price and we have multiple buyers, multiple offers. All of a sudden it's the hottest listing in the office and everybody's clamoring for it. What the sad part of this is, what we see is a lot of times the sellers wake up too late.
Yeah.
And they don't tell us that there's some sort of time constraint on their ability to sell. We just had, unfortunately, a seller pass away about a couple of weeks ago, and the business is, it's no longer for sale. It was a design company, a commercial design company, and the seller was everything, was the designer, and did just about everything in the construction process, and they have multiple jobs now where they can't finish the jobs because the seller was in charge of basically everything in the know-how of designing and finishing these construction jobs, and everybody internally was just kind of like a project manager.
Yeah.
And so very sad situation. And we've seen this over and over again where all of a sudden the seller wakes up and something changes in business, right? And
Right.
things are changing a little bit fast in business these days.
Just a little bit. Yeah.
A little bit. So all of a sudden your business can be out of business because something else moves in or you're not paying attention, you lose a big customer. And that all could have been avoided if we just priced the business right the first time.
Yeah, it's the opportunity cost of not being able to sell now versus in the future. I mean, even look at even not negative things really, but look at what we experienced over the last 18 months with interest rates. So we had businesses where the buyers were able to get great financing rates. We were doing a lot of SBA loans. The sellers were getting a lot of cash at closing. And then fast forward 2023 and cost of capital doubles,
triples.
Right. And now we're doing a lot more seller financing, a lot less bank loans. And I mean, that happened.
Prices had to come down for the cost of capital. I mean, all those things that have changed. And, and then of course you have the interruptions in the world, whether it be the COVID crisis, whether it be the economic downturn, whether it be an election, whatever it's going to change the world and give that disruption to the world to just make you have to stay. Because again, if your sales and revenues come down for some reason, big client leaves or whatever, the ability to sell might take another couple years for you to build up that value again.
Yeah. I'm thinking of, this is an awful example, but we had a chain of franchise gyms. You know where we're going with this.
Yeah.
Franchise gyms got an offer in January 2020.
Right.
And they didn't want to accept the offer because their asking price was over market.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just mentioned years to come back from that.
Right.
Obviously declined the offer, went back to market with the same elevated price. We all know what happens in March of 2020 in the fitness industry, which really to probably get back to that January price with trailing 3 years,
now,
5 years.
Yeah, 3 years now.
Yeah, maybe 3 years from now.
Right.
Yeah. So we went from 2020 to now being able to exit at that same price, 25, 26.
Right. So it's a big deal. And it's such a big deal that I wrote the article and sent it to my friends and our clients. We've shared it internally. And we just want to put it out there for not only everybody at Transworld, our sellers, the industry in general, because this is industry-wide. I mean, if you have a good business for sale, it should sell. And the only reason it's not selling is probably because you're overpriced.
Yeah. And we do a lot of episodes where we talk about how can you increase your value? How can you increase your likelihood to sell? We wanted to bring this topic. It's not the easiest to hear. And again,
Right.
go back to sometimes the price that you're asking is emotion and it's tied to what you've put into the business that you've built, and we get it. But I think the number one thing we're telling you now is if you want to position yourself to be in that percentage of businesses that are able to exit, pricing it appropriately in markets, it's really the only thing you need to do.
Get a broker opinion of value. Call one of your Transworld folks. They can provide that data to you.
Right.
And we could show you in black and white, and you could get pre-qualified with the SBA. You could see that value. There's plenty of ways to do it. You just can't rely on your own intuition, and you can't rely on your country club buddies or whatever.
Can't rely on the internet.
Yes.
Also.
Right.
Yeah.
So give us a call, and let's get these deals done, because it's going to be a great time to sell your business in the next few years. I really do believe that. So we have some great, speaking of deals,
Right.
we have a great deal of the week and a listing of the week.
Yeah, and listing of the week. And we'll try and drop some of that information into the show notes too. If you have any other questions, you can always reach us at thedealboardpodcast.com.
Absolutely. Have a great one.
Transworld Business Advisors is the world's largest business brokerage and mergers and acquisitions firm with over 500 brokers in nearly 200 offices worldwide. Transworld's team handles thousands of business sales every year. To be connected with a qualified business broker or learn more about the buying and selling process, visit tworld.com/the deal board or call 888-719-9098.
Hey, Andy, do you know what time it is? It's time for our deal of the week.
Deal of the week. Sold.
Welcome back to the Deal Board, everybody. This week, I'm joined by one of our partners in our Dallas-Fort Worth Central office, Linda Boswell. You've got a really, I'd call it a heartwarming story to cover today in our Deal of the Week. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this blow-dry bar that you recently sold?
Okay. And this is one of the reasons why I love doing this is, this did warm my heart. That's a great way to say it. I felt great about it. So it was a blow-dry bar. They bought it in January, or they opened it in January of 2020. So they bought it back in 2019, thinking they were going to have this going. 2020, they opened it up. And obviously 3 months later, everything was shut down, especially anything to do with hair and nails. So they basically had to eat the cost of the rent for the next year and a half. So no events were happening. No one's going to get their hair blow dried to make it look pretty. So let's see, it was pretty much the end of 2021 when they got to open it back up. And so they were losing about $9,000 a month. I will say they did tell me the landlord was gracious with them and gave them some leeway in there. But by 2022, about $4,000 a month, they were still losing. So they were telling me that they were going to have to file bankruptcy. So we really did a huge push and we went out and looked for more strategic buyers for them, even harder. And within about 30 days, we were able to find a buyer, two young ladies that came in and they were super excited. One more of an investor and one actually a hairdresser. And so she knew people to bring in. So it was great. Some of the old ones, even other employees actually decided to stay on. So we got that sold just days from them filing bankruptcy. So that was really a great story for me to be able to share with people. Feels good.
And there's a lot of learning lessons out of that. Like, first of all, sometimes you just can't control the circumstances, right? They did not buy this blow dry bar and then think we were entering a global pandemic months later. Sometimes you just have the circumstances aren't in your favor. But I think the other big lesson is you can sell a business that's losing money and that has, great build out, right? It sounds like it's probably a beautiful location, clients, assets. There is some value in everything.
Absolutely.
So I don't think it hurts to have a conversation with your local broker, maybe Linda, if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, just to have a conversation, even if you're in a little bit of trouble, to see what your options are.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's possible. And it's a beautiful place and a great location with the upcoming community in the area.
Awesome. Well, how can people reach out to you if they want to learn more about what you do or potentially have a business to sell in the Dallas area?
Absolutely. It's Linda Boswell and my phone number is 817-755-1026. And also you can reach me at lboswell@tworld.com. That'll get to you either way. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on today.
Always love having you on the show. And we'll drop Linda's contact information in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, Jessica, you know what time it is?
Money time?
Almost. It's time for listing of the week.
Welcome back to the Deal Board, everybody. We're live in our Dallas-Fort Worth Central office this week, and I have Julie with us from our Dallas-Fort Worth team. Julie, you just listed a great business. I'd love to learn a little bit more about it.
Absolutely. So I just listed a business. If you are in the fitness or the wellness industry, or you have a passion for personal training or helping people be healthy and fit, this is an opportunity for you. I've got it's a fitness studio. It's really similar to a personal training studio or a small group training studio. It's in a very wealthy and affluent suburb of Dallas-Fort Worth. It's a great opportunity. The seller needs to move on. And so this is a franchised opportunity with a great blueprint that's going to help you succeed. And you can get in on this for a fraction of what it would cost to start fresh as a franchise. So it's only $50,000, which is fantastic.
Wow.
That's $100,000 in paid off equipment already there. There's a manager and staff in place. And so it's pretty much turnkey. Just come in and take over and make it your own.
That's amazing. It sounds like a great deal.
It is.
Easy way to get in business, especially for a first-time business owner.
Yes.
Julie, how can people reach you if they want to learn more about this opportunity?
You can reach me at my phone number is 817-556-7534, or my email is jbarlow, J-B as in boy, ARLOW @tworld.com.
And we'll also drop all that contact information to the show notes. Julie, thank you so much for being on the Deal Board.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks for tuning into the show today. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends on social media. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcasting app. If you have questions, would like to appear, or have suggestions for topics for the show, get in contact with us through our website, thedealboardpodcast.com.